Hi, first graders. How are you today? Believe it or not, I'm Mrs. Perlman. I know I look different, and I hope you don't tease me, but I am wearing special glasses that are called screen protector glasses. Sometimes when I'm on the computer too long, it starts to give me a headache, and the screen might be a little too bright. So today I thought I'd try wearing them to see if I felt a little better. And I already do. So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to read you a story today about a boy who really loves apples. And that goes along really well with our fall unit. And Fridays are the nonfiction book days. So this story is a little different. It has some nonfiction features and some fiction. So it has a little bit of both. And your challenge today as a good listener is to see if you can figure out what sounds real and true from the past and what might be a little bit made up. It's called A Tall Tale, about a boy turns into a man, and his name is Johnny Appleseed. And the reason we're talking about him a little bit today is because he just had a birthday. If he was still alive, his birthday would be celebrated on September 26th, and that was just a few days ago. So let's begin. The thing about tall tales is you have to be a good listener because it's been told many different times over years and years, generations and generations. And sometimes when a story is retold and retold and retold, some of the truths get a little bit stretched out or some new ideas are added to make it more exciting. So as I said before, be a good listener because I want you to see what you can notice that might be real and make-believe. Okay, here we go. Johnny Appleseed. There he is. There's a drawing of Johnny Appleseed. What is that on his head? So this has a lot of words in it, so listen carefully. Long, long ago, a wee baby was born in Massachusetts and given the name John Chapman. In those days, most Americans lived on the East Coast, and they were only beginning to move west into Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Indiana. You might ask why we still remember humble John Chapman even today. He did not lead armies into battle or run the government. He did not found a city or invent something important. No, we remember John Chapman for something simpler, something smaller, and that something is part of his name. You've probably heard of him too. His nickname was Johnny Appleseed. Now, some people say Johnny Appleseed loved apples right from the start, while he was still a baby in his cradle. They say he would fuss and cry, something spectacular, until his mother fed him applesauce, or gave him cider, or brought him apple blossoms. So we'll be thinking about what might be stretched and what might be true there. That baby boy would giggle for hours, watching the branches of an apple tree sway in the breeze. When he grew a little older, an apple was his favorite ball for catching, and the branch of an apple tree was his favorite perch for daydreaming. He loved the other trees of the forest, too. His mother taught him the names of all the plants and animals. He loved the animals, and they loved him right back. Does with their fawns would come, does with their fawns would come up to lick his hand. Crows would bring him shiny bits and bobs they found by the sides of roads, and bears would lead him to the ripest berry patches. When he had grown into a young man, Johnny's feet began to itch. You see, Johnny's itching feet were telling him it was time to leave home and see the world. But Johnny did not mean to merely wander. Oh no, Johnny Appleseed had a mission in mind when he was getting ready to leave home. He knew people were fast moving west. Where they were moving, though, there were no apple trees. Johnny couldn't imagine a life without apples. He didn't want the pioneers in their new homes to be missing out on apple cider and applesauce and apple pies and apple turnovers and apple cakes, and you get the idea. So Johnny went and he gathered a big bag of apple seeds from the mill where they pressed apple cider. They had no use for the seeds at the mill, so they were happy to let Johnny take them. Soon Johnny was ready to leave home. He had his bag of seeds and he took a cooking pot so he could make dinner wherever he went. He carried the bag in his hand, but he wore the pot on his head, where it made a fine hat. Johnny walked and he walked, walking circles through New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. He walked through rain and he walked through snow. Sometimes he walked on roads, and his journey was easy. Sometimes he pushed through tangled forests so thick he must have been the first person to come through ever. Johnny walked so far he wore his shoes clear off. The soles of his feet grew tougher than the toughest boots. Johnny never wanted harm to come to any animal. This love of all life included even the lowliest of creatures. Why, one summer he noticed mosquitoes were flying into his campfire and burning up. He immediately put out the fire. He didn't want to be comfortable if it meant another creature was dying. If he was stung by a hornet, he'd take it gently in his hands and release it. He was once bit by a rattlesnake and killed it before by accident. He felt sorry about it for years afterward. One cold winter's night, Johnny went to curl up in an old hollow log. He planned to build a fire outside and curl up, snug as a bug. When he poked his nose in, however, he had a surprise. A mother bear and her two cubs had beaten him to the log. Quietly, so as not to disturb anybody, Johnny backed right out of the log and made his camp outside in the snow. Imagine coming up to a bear's den like that. Oh boy. Johnny made friends everywhere he went. He made friends with farmers and pioneers. They often shared their supper with him, or else Johnny cooked up a fine stew for everybody in his cooking pot hat. When Johnny's shirts or pants got ragged, one of his new friends would sew them back up again. Some of his friends even gave him new clothes. And every time they said goodbye, Johnny left his friends with small sacks of apple seeds to plant on their own farms. Decades later, you could tell where Johnny Appleseed had been by the orchards that grew up behind him. The longer Johnny walked, the less respectable he looked. At times he wore nothing more than a grain sack with a hole in the bottom for his head and a length of twine for his belt. But folks didn't mind. They knew old Johnny Appleseed was on a mission. He loved to stop and chat and tell his life story. Long after he'd walked on, Johnny's friends talked about how generous he was and about his kindness to animals. And he grew in their memories as the apple trees grew taller and stronger and bore loads of fruit. Johnny Appleseed walked for years and years. Little girls he'd brought ribbons became grandmothers, and little boys he'd carved wooden soldiers for became old men. Then one day, Johnny Appleseed planted his last tree. He lay down in one of the first orchards he planted, and he slept his last sleep. Even today, if you go to the right place in Ohio, throw your head back and take a big sniff. Did you catch a hint of apple blossoms in the air? That's the spirit of Johnny Appleseed passing by. So that tells a little bit more about the story of how it has true parts and some more exciting parts that might not be so true. And that's why it's called a tall tale. But he certainly was a real man that did exist. His name was John Chapman, and he lived from 1774 to 1845. He just got the nickname of Johnny Appleseed because of all the apple seeds he planted across the country. So the next time you eat an apple, I want you to think of Johnny Appleseed, and maybe, just maybe, that apple came from one of his original orchards. Who knows? I hope you enjoyed the story. Have a great day.